Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 19th ever Highlight Haven interview. My name is Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by a very special guest. He is a co host on the Big Doug and Carmi show. Let me welcome Doug McCray to the show. It's great to have you on.
Matthew, great to be on with you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's get right into it. I just want to start by asking when you first knew that you wanted to work in the sports industry.
Oh, well, I went to school to be in the media and it never really worked out that way. And then when COVID hit, I was talking to my brother, who I talked to every day about sports. And he said, you should do a podcast. And I said, yeah, I don't think so. And he said, you could just do it like we do on the phone every day. And so we did, and slowly we started out on Anchor with video. We did that for about a year and a half, and then moved over to StreamYard.
Mhm.
And well, I guess we did Zoom first. Everybody was doing Zoom for a while, and then we've been doing video and StreamYard for the last 2.5, 3 years. So I guess I never expected to be doing this like this.
Yeah, and I mean, on your podcast, you've had the opportunity to speak with people including John Keim, JP Finley, and Ben Standig, just to name a few. How would you describe the connections you've been able to build over the past few years?
Very fortunate, I think, and also very fortunate that we're in a market where the guys that have had more success are willing to come on and give guys like myself a little bit of credential that way in doing it. I think they respect the way that I interview them and ask questions and do the research, and that's the reason that they come back. So I definitely feel very blessed to have guys like that come and bless the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, transitioning over to some Commanders questions. Obviously, we have to start with the game winning Hail Mary on Sunday against the Chicago Bears. Jaden Daniels, with an absolute bomb, ended up getting tipped right into the hands of Noah Brown. What was going through your mind as that play went down?
We were getting ready to turn the TV off. And it was funny. I was talking to Authentic, who is a Giants content creator but lives in the DC area today on the show Proposition Wednesday, and he said he was at the game because it was his buddy's birthday. They were walking out of the tunnel to leave because they thought the game was over, and then heard everybody yelling and screaming. My mother-in-law was here, and she jumped out of the off the sofa and into my arms. There are very few moments when you get to have your jaw drop like that in good times, and that's what it was, a jaw drop moment, which was incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the stats and the overall impact in that game. Jaden Daniels undoubtedly outperformed Caleb Williams in that matchup. What do you think this wins for Daniels from just a confidence standpoint, beating the team that passed up on him in the draft?
Well, he won't say it. I'll say it for him. It had to feel really, really good, and it felt good for his teammates. I think somebody asked Noah Brown what it's like, and he said, "Well, I've never been a part of a play like that." And sometimes you just living right with the Lord, as Noah Brown said. So, like, I just think it's got to feel great for him. He'll say he's on to the next one. I'm sure he's on to the next one. But secretly, yeah, I mean, he outperformed him all game. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I think Caleb was 10 for something in that game. So, but also I think Jaden knows. I mean, that's his second passing touchdown at home, right? So I mean, sometimes better to be lucky than good.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the Bears selected Caleb Williams with that first overall pick. Do you think they're feeling any regret right now, or is it still too soon to tell?
No, I think they're happy with what they've got. I don't know if they're happy with the offensive coordinator, which was a bigger question mark to me than the selection of the quarterback that they took. I'm not a big fan of Shane Waldron, but no, I think they they did what they thought was right for the organization. And listen, hopefully this is one of those draft classes where the Bears got it right, the Patriots got it right, the Commanders got it right, the Broncos got it right. I mean, better quarterback play is better for the league and the people that consume it just because quarterbacks kind of move the needle more than any other position.
Yeah, now up to that touchdown throw, obviously we had just 12 points in the game, all from 4 field goals. Luckily, Austin Seibert, since we picked him up, has been practically automatic. But what were your main takeaways in that game, up until that final play?
Cybert the Cyborg, another one of those picks from the GM that, I mean, he's had all hits and no misses, which is pretty incredible. But yeah, I mean, the team had started out doing this, right? They led the league in red zone trips. I mean, think about that Giants game, up to the Giants game, lots of red zone trips, very little touchdowns. The games in between the Giants, there's about 7 weeks between that Giants game and the Bears game where the Commanders had kind of flipped that script and were scoring more touchdowns. This again was one of those games where they reverted back to kicking field goals. Listen, sometimes that's how it's going to go, right? I mean, they leaned on the run game heavily and kicked field goals, and thank goodness you've got a guy that's making them, because as bad as the quarterback play's been in Washington, so has the kicker. So this has been another nice trend this season.
Yeah, now when you look at Terry McLaurin, since the first 2 weeks of the season, he's averaged 90 receiving yards per game to go along with 4 total touchdowns. Would you say his increase in production really has to do with the obvious improvement at the quarterback position?
Yes, although it's an interesting thing with wide receivers. I had the opportunity to talk to Matt Harmon with the reception perception at Yahoo, and I asked him about better quarterback play and the receivers that benefit from it. And he said, yes, obviously that will make a difference, but the key for wide receivers is target shares. So as long as you're still getting the usage and the target shares, to me, that's been one of the bigger things is Terry's target usage is up. He's getting more opportunities to catch the ball. So yeah, it's a two part. Yes, he definitely benefits from better quarterback play, better offensive line play, a better offensive coordinator. But also it's that target share that's really important.
Yeah, and I mean, leading up to this season, in McLaurin's past 4 seasons, he had 1,000 yards in all of those seasons receiving. However, in 2 of those 4 seasons, he got only 4 receiving touchdowns. And this season alone, as I mentioned, he already reached that 4 touchdown threshold. Do you think it just helps Jaden Daniels, him being able to move the ball downfield and just be much more productive, in the red zone, as you mentioned earlier?
I think you nailed it. The opportunity to get deep down the field on some of those in breaking crossers and obviously the go routes definitely help. And a quarterback that's willing, when given the opportunity, to pump the ball down the field, obviously good for Terry. And Cliff does a really good job of of calling plays that get receivers open. So as long as Jaden can see it and rip it, and he hadn't been great at that, ripping it when he sees it. He's gotten better at that. Again, that benefits Terry.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, speaking of wide receivers, just yesterday the Panthers signed or sent wide receiver Deontay Johnson to the Ravens for a 5th round pick. Of course, Washington was another possible landing spot for Johnson. Do you think the Commanders' wide receiver core is fine how it is right now, or do you think they'll regret not going after a guy like Johnson when they had the opportunity to?
This will be interesting, and then they've still got the opportunity. Trade deadline is not done. There are guys like Cortland Sutton out in Denver that supposedly are available if the price is right. Zach Selby, who is the writer for the Commanders, joined me a couple weeks ago, and I asked him this kind of question about should they be buyers or sellers at the deadline. It's the question everybody asks this time of year. And he said, I thought this was interesting. The only thing that you want is one thing to add talent. You're always trying to add talent to a roster, but what you don't want to do is mess up the chemistry. And right now, the team is firing almost on all cylinders. So, like, how much do you want to mess up that chemistry by adding somebody new to the room? And that's why Adam Peters gets paid the big bucks.
Yeah, and I mean, this isn't necessarily, obviously, I do want to highlight when the Jets traded for Devontae Adams. Obviously, that's not losing chemistry because Adams had played 8 seasons with
Sure.
Rodgers previously in Green Bay, but it hasn't looked great since the Jets have lost their 2 games so far with Devontae Adams. But another player, despite Deontay Johnson no longer being available, as you mentioned, there are still players they could go after. You said the name Courtland Sutton. Another player who has still been in trade talks is obviously Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins. Is he a guy who you think Washington is likely to go after?
Probably not, and I think that's well, first of all, I don't think the Bengals will move him. I think, that you put that out there so that you can see what he may bring back, but that offense is predicated on having 2 good wide receivers, and frankly, the league in general is that way, and that's why most fans think that the Commanders should go out and get another wide receiver. The thing with T. Higgins is it was kind of like you're gonna have to pony up for him probably a couple of seconds or in a third, maybe in 2 drafts from now. And of course, then you got to pay him big bucks. Now, you don't mind paying guys, and Washington has the money to do it. I think that's the kind of trade that moves the needle for fans, but it doesn't align with what at least I've heard about Adam Peters and the long-term plan. I would be surprised if that's a move that he'd like to make.
Yeah, and I mean, sticking with the wide receiver core for right now, of course, we sent Jahan Dotson to the Eagles, but we still have those younger guys, Luke McCaffrey, Diame Brown. Do you expect these guys to progress as the years go on and, really become those solid number 2, number 3 receivers?
Well, Giambi Brown is interesting. I'm not sure. They've tried to get him involved. I think they see what the speed does to defenses. The other Brown, I think, is closer to Noah Brown is closer to
Yeah.
being the number 2 guy, simply because he offers them a different skill set, a different body type than the other guys do. You can see, I mean, Luke McCaffrey pretty much catches everything that comes to him. So it'll be finding a way. We talked about target shares. It'll be finding a way to get him a better percentage of the target shares. And then Ben Sinnott really has not been involved in the passing game, and I think they'll ramp that up some.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, moving over to the other side of the ball, I think it's safe to say that the defense, specifically the secondary, in my opinion, has shown much improvement since the start of the season. However, assuming this team does make the playoffs this year, which I don't want to jinx anything, can you trust this defense in those big time situations?
Well, that will be the key, I think, Matt, to your point, and we don't know. I mean, I hate to be that way, but I mean, we just don't know. You can see what's happened when they moved Sanders outside, how much they helped. You can see how much this coaching staff that came from Dallas liked Igbenogany, who was from Dallas on their practice squad. Those things are gelling. The safeties are playing better. Quan Martin may be the most undervalued guy on this defense, and then you've got Bobby Wagner and Luvu, linebackers we haven't had for decades, maybe since London Fletcher played. So I thought it was interesting. I think to wrap that up, I think it was interesting. Coach Witt said in an interview a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if you caught this or not, but basically he said, I have to keep telling myself that this isn't a year 3 install of the defense in Dallas. This is a year 1 install for the Commanders, and it's why when they say things like, "We like Luvu in that Micah Parsons role, but we're waiting to put all that on him," and you can see as the weeks have gone by that the defense is slowly getting better and better and better as they figure out the pieces that work together and kind of the scheme that works, and I appreciate that some defensive staffs we've had in here in the past would refuse to mold their defense to the skill set of the players we have. You can tell this group is not about that. They just want to make sure that the defense is playing as well as possible.
I think we can all agree that, people in the secondary like Quan Martin and Mike Sanistril, as you mentioned, have a very bright future, but someone whose future is a lot more of a question. And I don't want to have this conversation just in his second year, but Emmanuel Forbes, obviously, he did get his first interception of the season against Carolina 2 weeks ago, but there's still a lot of doubt surrounding him. Where do you think his career, what's his career path following this season?
If I was betting on it, I would guess that he won't be here next year,
Really?
and they'll move him on somewhere else. Yeah, I would be surprised. I think there's been enough time in this season for them to have figured out whether he's part of the long-term plan. And if he was part of the long-term plan, you have seen them implement guys that they know are part of the long-term plan and are willing to like deal with their shortcomings as they get up to speed with what we're doing. I don't know that Forbes fits in that mold. Now he's playing a little bit of special teams. That will help him because if you don't play special teams as a corner and you're not the starter, tough to dress on Sundays. So now they're getting him a little involved in that. Maybe long term, I don't see him as a commander.
Yeah, and do you see the Commanders going with a cornerback in the first round of this upcoming draft?
Certainly, the first couple, there's no doubt about that. I still wonder if they want to
Mhm.
improve at the tackle spot, either left or right. And I think they definitely I don't think that they'd wanna go into next season with Sanders as the boundary corner. I think they'd like to be able to get him back in the nickel, and that probably means that you're spending on a high corner. This year's draft has a lot of good corners, so I think they'd be well placed to pick one for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, after like I'd say the first or the 2 weeks of the season, four of the main areas that you know, people were looking at in terms of this upcoming draft for the Commanders were offensive line, wide receiver, defensive line, and cornerback. I think wide receiver has kind of, left that conversation a little bit based on how they've played. They're still there, but I don't know if it's the number one necessity. So, we'll definitely see what happens there, where they do go with the first round pick. But of course, the Commanders' next matchup is on the road against the New York Giants, a very winnable game for Washington, to say the least. What would you say are the keys to victory in that one for the Commanders?
I think the Giants have the best D line that they'll play all year. I think Dexter Lawrence may be one of the top 5 players in the league. Not defensive players in general. I find him to be one of the most exciting players to watch on the field. We don't know whether Coleman's going to go. He's in concussion protocol. Lucas was last seen in a walking boot with the ankle. So that leaves Trent Scott and some guys that you never heard of. They got to go up there and face Brian Burns and Aziz Ojolari on the edges. So I think being able to run the ball, Brian Robinson's averaging over 3 yards after contact. They need to run the ball and they got to be able to keep Jaden clean from those pass rushes. I think that's the biggest key to this thing. And again, it'd be nice to get out early. I think if you can get out early on this Giants team, they're already feeling like wins are going to be tough to come by. So I think getting up early is also going to be a big thing, and then just wearing them down, leaning on that run game.
Yeah, and Giants offensive lineman Andrew Thomas, of course, suffered that season-ending injury. Since then, the Giants offensive line has definitely struggled. Do you think Johnny Newton, of course, he came back, got that sack in his first career start. You have your other guys on the defensive line. Do you think they take advantage of that struggling defense or offensive line in this game for the Giants?
I think they do, and I think it's important to remember that the fastest place between 2 points is a straight line. This unit likes to get pressure from the interior. Johnny Newton is the most explosive guy they've got, and he's getting healthy now. Deron Payne, I think being next to Johnny Newton serves him better than John Allen. Now, I'm not saying that I think Johnny Newton is better than John Allen. He may be. We don't know that yet. But I think their skill sets together are improved, are better than Allen and Payne's together. And I also think that Fedarian Mathis, the second round pick from 3 years ago, has been playing really well in this new system. And I think that's important to say. So I think they've got an opportunity to get after it too. Luvu's on a roll, and Dante Fowler looks like the kid that came out of Florida, which is crazy.
Yeah, now the last time the Commanders faced off against the Giants was, earlier this season during week 2. In that game, Devin Singletary had 16 carries for 95 yards and a touchdown. And then just last week, the Bears running back, DeAndre Swift, had 18 carries for 129 yards and a touchdown as well. Since that last game, the Bears have transitioned more to, Tyrone Tracy instead of Devin Singletary. But of course, Tracy is in concussion protocol. So whether the Giants end up using Singletary or Tracy in that matchup, what adjustments are the Commanders going to have to make in this upcoming game to really limit New York's run game?
Well, the defensive tackles have a propensity to get out of their rushing lanes to attack the quarterback. Now, part of that is the scheme, right? Like you were just trying to get to the quarterback no matter what. And if you hit the running back on the way in a running play, that's great. If not, you expect the linebackers to clean it up. Also, I think it's important. I'm a huge Georgia fan. I've known DeAndre Swift for a long time. Two of those, I mean, half of his yards came off 2 plays, right? So if they just clean that up, then that stat doesn't look nearly as nice. Devin Singletary is okay. If Tracy can't go, I think it makes it a much easier day for the defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, going into this season, I don't think anyone could have predicted the Commanders having a winning record, let alone starting the season 6-2. Despite this hot start, do you believe that this is a team that can actually contend this season come playoff time?
I actually had them winning 11 games before the season
Really?
started. I did. I felt ridiculous for saying it out loud and in front of people. For however many hundreds of people that tuned in for that episode, I felt kind of silly. But if Jaden was anything close to what they thought he was, I thought they'd be able to do it. Part of that is because I thought that the defense would be good enough to keep them in games until Jaden came along. It's been interesting that it's been the other way around. But Cliff's been so good at getting people open and making easy reads for Jaden that he's been wildly successful. And now that the defense is kind of coming along with them, the schedule the schedule opens up a little bit depending on how you like the Eagles or the Cowboys.
Mhm. Yeah, now, I mean, also when you get to the playoffs, you know, you like the young guys, but you're also going to need the veterans to really lead the way. And this team isn't filled with veterans, but I think there's still a solid amount of them. Of course, Bobby Wagner on the defensive side, and then you also have, Terry McLaurin, who actually just turned 30 years old recently, so he's getting up there in age, which is crazy to say. And then you also have Zach Ertz, tight end, obviously. So there are a bunch of older guys who can help them contend. But I do have one final question to ask before we wrap things up. If there was one piece of advice you could give to an aspiring sports broadcaster and journalist like me, what would it be?
I ask this to other content creators that come on with me for the first time most of the time. And I think what people say to me all the time, and I couldn't agree more, just do it. If you want to have a podcast, get a microphone and do it audio if you don't want to be seen on there. If not, pull your laptop up and just get on the key is just doing it. And that's with most things in life, right? Just get out there and do it. Be uncomfortable. It's okay. You're not going to be great the first time. You're not probably going to be great the last time. But if you can get a little bit better each episode, if you can tweak things, maybe it's, year one, you replace your camera, year two, or, your microphone or your backdrop or whatever. But just getting out there and doing it, putting yourself out there and being vulnerable. Listen, nobody's great the first time. Nobody's great the 10th time, probably not the 100th time. So just getting out there and doing it, so important.
Yeah, 100%. With that being said, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to say to the people watching before we wrap things up?
I just want to thank you for having me on, Matthew. I think you did a fantastic job today. And listen, if this is what the young creators are doing, then the Commanders fan base is in great shape.
Yeah, really appreciate the support. Again, big thanks to Doug McCray for being the 19th ever Highlight Haven interview guest. And as always, we'll see you next time.